Okay, we're going to have our first look at the brand new Medeco M4. This is a production prototype, so the parts may slightly change as production gets in, but this is a first look. So this is the M4, as you can see. Okay, let's look at a little more detail. Here's the cam with the two screws and a little cam plate. Here's the top spring grub screws and the top springs, the main springs, the driver pins. Now these are standard pins in this particular cylinder, which, remember, this is a production prototype, so it could be subject to change. And here are the biaxial pins. We'll get into looking at those in a little more detail. Here's the plug. Notice the crescent half moons protecting the top chambers and also protecting the sidebar. Here is the sidebar and the sidebar springs. We'll look at that in more detail as well. Let's go swing over and look. Here are the, what are we going to call these? The sidebar pins. And the M5 and the M4, excuse me, is active, not only active on the top pins and the rotational of the biaxial pins, but these additional sidebar pins. And there's the springs. We'll be looking at those in more detail as well. And last but not least is the plug. You can see we've got drill protection there. We have the 6 chambers. This is the sidebar channel. We have drill protection protecting that. And this is here where the finger pins or the sidebar pins go. Here's the key, and the you can see the biaxial cuts. You see the interactive element right here. You can see the sidebar grooves here, and this little interactive element, if you're in the groove here, it pushes through like that. There you go. That's the interactive element, and that's the key, M4 key. Let's look at the sidebar. You can see right here these little holes here are where the springs sit. You can see the 5 fingers that would go into the biaxial pins as they're rotated correctly. And these little, up on the top surface, are the gates for the finger pins, or the sidebar pins I should call them. The sidebar here is pretty tiny, very well machined. I wanted to show the end of it here. This is the sidebar action that would go into the groove in the plug. And you can see a top view of where the channels, the cuts for the sidebar pins would have to go. You can see how they're nicely milled there. There's again where the springs go. I'm quite impressed. This is a very precise lock. Very well made. What I was trying to show here was the action of the interactive element. Notice how you can see that in the 3rd chamber. There's actually a slope cut here in the plug that forces that out, and that would lift the number 3 sidebar pin. Very interesting. I don't know if the camera will show. We can see down into the plug. We can see the biaxial cut. Looks to me like, what do we got? We got some some aft, or is it 444, a center cut, a fore and an aft, I think is what it was. I can't see them very well through the camera lens. Perhaps you can see the cuts of the key. There's another thing that you should notice here, is there's some counter milling, double counter milling here. This is like the ASA twins with the barrel spools. This is pretty tricky. It's a double single, or a double shallow counter milling here. Man, it's pretty grippy. So if you were to put the ASA barrel spools in here, this could make it quite formidable. Right now, the prototype production unit has just a standard brass and a 1 steel driver. Now we're looking at pin number 6, key pin, biaxial pin. Notice this little groovy here. We have a little undercut groove all the way around. It's kind of, but I only see, there's no false gates on the I'm running out of battery. Here is biaxial pin number 1. Looks like an aft. But notice this groove here in the middle of it. And of course we got the little finger on it to limit the rotation. It's an interesting pin. So not only we have to lift it, we have to rotate it, and then we have to do the finger pins, or the sidebar pins as well. You can see there's only one true gate there for the sidebar, but that could change in production. There could be more false gates, and I don't know if this groove is intended to catch in the counter milling of the plug or not, but it's an interesting feature. Perhaps it will. And of course, we want to see the most important feature is the new sidebar pins. You can see that this one has a false gate on either side. Up on top here is where the spring sits, and we have this groove here that keeps it aligned so it will face the sidebar. We wouldn't want it to rotate. So you can see a false groove and the true groove, or a false groove on either side. We'll take a look at, this is number 4 pin. This is number 3 pin, and I don't see as many false gates here. It's a little different. I don't know if my focus is doing well. But that's number 3, and this battery's going low. Okay, now we're looking at the number 2 sidebar pin. It looks to me like it only has one false gate. It's hard for me to see through the lens of the camera. Here are the not the monitor on the camera, but you got the rotation limiter, and then where the spring would sit. It's an interesting pin. Let's go and grab number 1. Okay. Here's the first finger pin in the first chamber. Am I focusing? I can't see through. I think it only has one false gate too. You can see better than me, and the little smaller diameter where the spring sits and the rotation limiter. This is quite well made. It's a very small part, very precision machine. I'm quite impressed. Okay, this is just a shot. I put all the drivers on top. I put in the key pins. I put the drivers on top just to show that there are no zero lift pins. And also, the drivers are all in there, so if those were the acid barrel spools and that double shallow counter milling, that would be pretty damn effective. So I would expect to see that in the production normal cylinders, make it much more difficult to set those pins. This was just a shot of the plug with the key pins in there. I don't know if we were able to see the double counter milling or not. I can't rotate this silly thing. So it has that double shallow counter milling like the old asses. Well, like the new asses, but that's what it is. So the key pins are in there, and you okay, now we've reassembled the M4. Works quite well. M4, can we see it? M4. I'm impressed with the quality of this lock. It's pretty well made, good tolerances, and you can definitely feel the sidebar action. A very nice lock. Looking forward to getting my hands on a production model. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed.